Welcome back to the Voices of Long COVID podcast. I'm your host, Noelle. On each episode, I'll be featuring a different long COVID sufferer and sharing their story. We will learn about the strength and resilience of those who continue to persevere with this chronic condition that has drastically altered their lives. There are an estimated 400 million people suffering with long COVID worldwide. People say they don't know anyone with long COVID. Well, now you can say that you do. On this week's episode, I'm speaking with James from Vancouver, BC, who's an actor, a writer, and a director who has been dealing with long COVID since November of 2020. Welcome, James.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so nice to catch up with you. It's been a while.
Yes.
James and I met through a mutual friend who knew that I had long COVID, and when you developed it as well, she put us in touch. And I remember, I think it was the summer of 2021 when you called me on the phone, and I had met many people online with long COVID, but it was so nice to just hear someone else's voice who was going through the same thing as I was.
Yeah, I felt the same.
So thank you for sharing your story with me and with our listeners today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So starting off, give us a bit of your history. What was your life like and your health like before your COVID infection?
I've always been the kind of person that people thought I was younger than my actual age. I've attributed that to a very healthy lifestyle. I had been exercising regularly, yoga, don't drink, don't smoke. I'm an actor, so my whole life revolved around my body and my spirit and mental and physical health as a performer.
Mm-hmm.
So I was extremely healthy and very ambitious and could outwork most other actors and writers in my field and was proud of that and was very aggressively pursuing my dreams as an actor and filmmaker leading up to when I got sick in November 2020.
Mm-hmm. And what led you to getting infected with COVID and then developing long COVID?
Um, I ended up at a small dinner gathering that was supposed to be myself plus three people, and then there was an uninvited guest, and the person that was there, unfortunately tested positive for COVID a couple days later, and then I um, and my mom tested positive a few days after her, 3 or 4 days after her. Yeah.
And so what was your acute infection like?
Well, so this was November 6th, 2020. So the virus had been around for a year and nobody knew much about it. A lot of people didn't know anybody that had been
Mm-hmm.
infected by it. No, not many people knew. If I had heard of somebody that someone at their work died from it, but not everybody kind of knew about it, including myself. So I didn't really know how bad it was. So I was feeling flu-like symptoms one day. Didn't really think I had COVID, but I thought, oh, I better test just in case, because this was like a day after I felt a little bit of flu-like symptoms. A little bit of a sore throat or something simple.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing you would not have had in any other kind of cold or flu coming on. But because it was the pandemic and just on a whim decided, well, I better just test. And I tested and then I tested positive and I messaged my mom, and she tested positive, and phoned a few close people in my life to say, "Hey, I've tested positive." So I um, was one of the first people that anybody knew in my circle, maybe, that had ever tested positive. So then that particular night, I went to bed, and I've never had a fever that bad. I wear a mouth guard because I grind my teeth at night, and I was so cold that I chattered right through the mouth guard, and I had an impossible sleep of cold and sweats. It was an crazy fever and nightmares. So I had that over a couple days, and then I all of a sudden I was having a hard time breathing. I phoned the ambulance to come and get me,
Mm-hmm.
to take me to the hospital. So then I went, the ambulance phoned me from outside the house, and they said, "We're here." And they took 10 minutes to put on like hazmat suits. And they said, "We got to get dressed up to come into your house."
Scary.
And so I watched them from my house get literally put hazmat suits on. And then they came into my house, put me in the ambulance. We drove to VGH, which is actually not that far from my house. Drove there. And then again, I sat in the ambulance while I don't know what they did there, but they had to kind of prepare a room at VGH to accept me. And when I was in the ambulance, because I'm a filmmaker, some people told me, "Oh, you got COVID." Nobody really knew anyone with COVID. They're like, "You got to film it." So I started filming myself with my phone. Anyway, so after a while, they brought me into a special room that was kind of sealed off, part of emergency. And I
Mm-hmm.
sat in there alone for a while, and then a nurse came, and then a doctor came, and they did chest x-rays, checked me over, and the funny thing is they're like, "Oh, you're totally fine." Like medically at the VGH, they're like checked everything, and they're like, "You're fine." And I'm like, "Well, obviously I'm not fine. I can barely breathe, and I feel like I'm dying." And so they gave me a ton of steroids. There was a couple interesting things that happened at VGH, but anyway, I was released. And the next 3 or 4 days later, again, I found that I couldn't breathe. So I guess this whole week that I'm referring to, I was having a hard time breathing. So then at the 1 week mark of having been infected, again, I called the ambulance, and I was like, I mean, I wouldn't call the ambulance if I wasn't in trouble. I
Yeah, of
felt like
course.
I was gonna die. And then so I went back in the ambulance, back to VGH. So I've been now this is my second time in like 4 or 5 days at VGH. And this time when they checked me out, I had a doctor come in, and this is when Trump had COVID, and they'd give him remdesivir or something. This was at the beginning of them starting to have experimental drugs to help people that were infected. And so Trump had it. So the one doctor joked and said, if you were a president or an ex-president, we'd wheel you into another room here and give you a cocktail. So at VGH at that time, they did have those same experimental drugs that Trump
That Trump
had.
had. Interesting.
And my first thought was like, oh no, like save that for like an old lady, somebody who's 80 that's, gonna die. Like I didn't say, "Oh, please give that to me." I just thought like, I'm healthy. I'll get through this. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Save that valuable drug or that rare drug for the next person that really needs it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is in retrospect, that may have saved me from long COVID. Um,
Absolutely.
that's the reason I bring it up. But a couple interesting things happened in that VGH emergency thing, which is a nurse told me, she said, how in the press in Canada, they said the first cases in Canada came about in February. Um, maybe there's something in
Of
January of
2020.
2020. She was like, that
Hmm.
is not the case. She said that in no late November of 2019, she said it was raging through VGH. And and
Interesting.
so um I bring that up because I think that when I meet long COVID people, a significant number of them are from they got sick at the beginning of 2020 when
Hmm.
we were all
Yep.
just finding out about it, and we were all like going to the grocery store buying boxes of soup, and everyone started to lock down. From what I believe is that a heck of a lot of people got it in December, January before we officially locked down. And those people were not diagnosed as having COVID because they didn't weren't testing people. And those people, from all the people that I have met online and through friends of friends and contacts, there seems to me, in my opinion, a significant number of them come from they got sick at the beginning of 2020. So it makes me think that that wave was massive, more than we know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, in the case of my husband, they tested him, but they didn't test the rest of the household. They just said you're presumptive positives.
Hmm.
And so if you think about every case that they had in their daily news report, for every case, there was probably a household full of people that were not tested. So the
Yes.
numbers have been off this whole time.
Yeah. So then the one thing that happened in emergency, that this was the first, so I had never heard of long COVID. It was barely a coined phrase at that time. This is November 2020. And the first hint that I got was that the doctor that took care of me in emergency was a great doctor. He gave me a whole bunch of steroids, which all of a sudden I could breathe, and really helped me out temporarily, these steroids. He looked at me, and because now I'd been in the hospital twice and I wasn't recovering like I would have expected from a quote unquote cold or flu. He looked at me and he said, I don't know what he said, something like, this may take a long time. There are people that are taking, I guess he could tell that couldn't believe that I was still sick like a week or 10 days after being infected.
Hmm.
And he said to me, there are people that are having this for a long time, or there's taking them a long time. And I didn't quite realize the gravity of what he was telling me. And he probably didn't either, because it was so new. Nobody had had COVID longer than 8 months at that time.
Hmm.
But he obviously had seen that there were people not recovering quickly.
And so, what happened going forward? How were you diagnosed with long COVID, or how did you come to know that you had long COVID?
So after two trips to emergency, I was sick at home with COVID for, like, let's say it was a couple weeks, and doing what you usually do with a cold, having orange juice and chicken noodle soup. And mentally, you're like, I can get through this. The most I've ever been sick is a week to 3 weeks is a long one. So after 2, 3, 4 weeks, it was like, wow, this is really taking a long time. I'm still really sick. I had this, what I called kennel cough. My lungs were screwed up and I was coughing like a dog, like with kennel cough, like just
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
coughing. Um, and then I can't describe exactly when, but I'm gonna say like three, 3 to 5 weeks later, I was starting to tell people, "Oh yeah, I'm coming around." Everyone was worried because I put on a video on Facebook showing that I was having a hard time breathing and saying, "Hey, I have COVID." And for all you people out there that don't know anybody with it, well, now you do. And that video went to like 10,000 people saw it within 3 days.
Wow.
It spread from my friends to my friends' friends, and I was getting calls from like Texas from people that knew, like, it spread really fast. What was I saying? about the
You put out a video.
oh yeah, yeah. So what happened was I felt like I was improving, but what I think was happening was I was getting through the COVID infection, and then after a while, I was saying to myself, like another week, I got to be better. But at the same time, I was like, well, I'm still really messed up. And all of a sudden, it became the fatigue. I was in bed 95% of my life was in bed, and I couldn't shake this headache. And cognitively, I'm a writer and I read, and cognitively, I couldn't handle half an hour of any kind of mental focus in a day.
Hmm.
In retrospect, it was morphing into this long COVID, and probably what happened with it was within a couple weeks, I had beaten COVID, but it had just annihilated my body and brain to such an effect that all of a sudden I was like this, it just turned into this other thing where I was in bed like 95% of the time. And the fatigue was so bad I could barely walk from my bed to the kitchen, which is like 15 feet. I could barely get there. So
Hmm.
it morphed into this thing. But at the time, I wasn't talking to people on the phone saying I have long COVID. I was just saying I'm still trying to get through COVID. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems to be pretty common that after the acute infection, about 3 to 5 weeks later is when the long COVID sets in and you have all these random symptoms, and it's hard to put two and two together at that point.
Yeah, and it was just so new.
Yeah.
It was totally new. People that were ahead of me that had got so I got sick November 6th. So if people got sick in February, March, which seems to be the bulk of them, that's 7, 8 months earlier, those people were starting to go online saying, okay, it's been 6, 7 months and I'm not better. And that's what happened with me. In my Facebook post, I came across another actor friend of mine, and he put a post up and he said, hey, just so you know, it's been 6 months since I got COVID, and I want to let you guys know that I'm not better yet.
Hmm. Yeah. And there were many of us who were screaming from the rooftops trying to tell people, like, this is real, still suffering. I would update people on every hospital visit that I had. And I think I made a joke that, you know, VGH was now on my bingo card, and
Yeah.
that, I'd made the rounds, but nobody was really taking it seriously.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break and remind you, with full disclosure, that this podcast takes several days to record and create, depending on the health of the host and the guests. I am relying on the help of others for editing. Any discussion of modalities or treatments are not to be considered medical advice. If you believe you have long COVID, know that you are not alone. Seek out the many Facebook groups for community support, such as Long COVID Canada and COVID Long Haulers Support Group Canada, and please speak to your doctor for medical support. How did things go for you when you sought medical care for long COVID?
Well, my family doctor was pretty hilarious because I phoned him and I said, I'm not doing well. At some point, him or the receptionist said, "Well, we don't want you a block within the doctor's office," because they didn't have many people that had COVID, and they didn't have many people that were still saying they were ill, a month later. So they didn't want they didn't want to see me. Um, I so the best medical attention I had was the doctors at emergency, honestly, because I think they had seen so much COVID. Yeah, and they knew. I don't know, for some reason it was refreshing in the hospital just because they knew that it was real what I had or something. That
Well,
was
yeah, they were on the front lines. They they'd been dealing with it for a year at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the most refreshing help I get. And I can't go to emergency whenever you have, anything to deal with. So
Yeah.
my family doctor, bless his heart, he's a very, he's Irish and he's 75 and he just wants to see studies in front of him before he'll
Hmm.
yes or no anything. So he didn't, I mean, and he even told me, he goes, nobody knows. But I've even had to be an advocate for myself with him because I don't think he has anybody else with long COVID. And I
Really?
have to keep educating him saying, I'm still sick. It's 3.5 years later and I'm still in trouble here,
Hmm.
So it's eases my mind or refreshing to talk to any doctor that understands what I'm going through. If they believe me because they have other people, or when I talk to other people with long COVID, because it's very isolating. It's a very isolating life for me now. People see me and they think, "Oh, you look great," and you're fine. They assume I'm recovered, but they haven't seen that I was in bed half the day, or that I had to rest up to do that social function, or that I'm putting on a brave face. So I find it very refreshing talking to other people with long COVID or doctors that understand that it is real.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've heard people say, I'm not faking being sick, I'm faking being well.
Yeah,
And
that's, yeah,
that resonates with me for sure.
yeah.
How has long COVID impacted your relationships with family, friends, colleagues, and even strangers, people on the internet?
It's completely upended my social life. I can't even begin to describe it, but basically, for a bunch of reasons, if I don't know, like people just can't believe. There's some family members and friends, if I tell them I'm still sick, they just can't believe it. They just see me looking okay. And I don't know what that's about. They don't want me to be sick is probably part of it. Or I don't know, or they're trying to encourage me, but that's very difficult. And unfortunately, because of that, I've lost a lot of friends. I've had to distance myself from anybody that doesn't believe I'm sick, or um, the other thing is I can't handle my brain is so fried that I can't handle that kind of interaction if someone doesn't believe that I'm sick. And I can't handle any kind of drama that might go with that. And I can't handle conflict. So anybody in my life that I used to have the energy to kind of deal with before, if they are crazy making or causing any kind of drama, as a matter of survival, I have to distance myself from those people because a, a social conflict will trigger a migraine and it'll take me 3 to 8 weeks of hard meditative type work for me to get rid of that migraine. So I can't handle unnecessary conflict
Yeah,
social through a social interaction.
it's an energy suck for sure,
Yeah,
and we don't have the energy.
yeah. And what I've realized through this is the brain and I knew this before, the brain uses a huge amount of energy it uses a lot of energy, just like your body does. Your brain is very active. And so my brain is taxed. And if it gets any kind of social conflict, it just it just overworks it, and I'm just screwed up for months.
Oh, yeah. I, our body and our brain is on high alert, and we're trying to heal. And so we have to stay in that healing type of energy if we're going to get better.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what symptoms do you continue to have now? And have you received any new diagnoses that you would like to share?
Um, so I have cognitive impairment. I have a hard time like I'm a writer, and I used to be able to write for 4 to 8 hours a day. If I really needed to, I could pull an all-nighter. Now
Hmm.
it takes me all day to get ready to write for an hour or two, or yeah, it's an all day affair to create the Zen hour or two for me to write. It becomes instead of writing the whole day, now it's becoming the whole day to rest up enough to write.
Hmm.
I'm having cognitive problems. Like I said, the migraine, I mean, I've basically had a headache for 3.5 years since I got sick. It just goes into remission through a lot of work, and then it'll be right back. And that's just in the last year. I pretty much had a headache constantly for 2 years. That and I never had a migraine in my life. So
Really
cognitive
brutal.
impairment, migraine, and then fatigue. I have a hard time explaining the fatigue to people because it's not like I'm lazy or I'm tired.
Hmm.
It's if I don't rest when I need to rest, or if I don't have like a 1 hour lie down in the middle of the day, or if I exert myself too much, I get this like really ugly energy flowing through my blood. I can't describe it. It's not just fatigue. Fatigue isn't the right word. It's
No.
like there's like a poisonous kind of like feeling in my blood
Yeah,
of
I've felt
that.
that too.
and
Yeah.
it now I've had this for so long, and I know, okay, God, I gotta lie down here, like I'm gonna be in real trouble. And so
Yeah.
sometimes, most of the time, I need an hour nap every day, but sometimes just lying down for half an hour can do wonders too. But I do have to like lie down and rest. I'll be in big trouble if I try to push through a whole day. I'll be in real trouble.
Hmm.
So fatigue, cognitive problems, and the migraine. And when I talk to other long COVID people, everyone's story is a little bit different, but I see those three things as common across the board. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that poisoned feeling is brutal. You feel like you're slowly dying.
Yeah, and that's like what I say, like fatigue isn't the right word. It's like a medical chemical
No.
problem. And same when people are like, "Oh, you got brain fog." I think, you know what, that sounds a little light. Like I tried to tell people, they're like, "Oh yeah, you got a little brain fog." Like, brain fog sounds like it's a sunny day, you're in San Francisco at the wharf and a little fog comes in and you're like, "Oh wow, my day's not it's going so great. Oh, the fog lifted. Okay, I'm back." Brain fog. I was trying to tell people, I was like, you know what it feels like right now is somebody is like poured concrete in my skull. Like I can't think. It's I don't know who came up with this term brain fog,
Yeah,
but
they need a new term.
yeah, it's not
I
accurate.
I feel like I've had a stroke. I lose
Yeah.
words. I can't even function. I feel this brain pressure, like there's a vice squeezing my
Yes.
forehead.
Yeah.
And I lose the ability to think.
Yeah.
And I've had a cold before where you get a bit foggy. It's nothing like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll be back to our interview after a short brain break. The stories of my guests are remarkable in the sense of what they have survived and continue to deal with each and every day. Although unremarkable in that long COVID can happen to anyone, no matter your age or your health. It has happened and it continues to happen. This is an equal opportunity virus. What is daily life like for you now? How has your life changed?
Well, before, as a very ambitious filmmaker, it was just all about my acting instrument, which means physical health and vocal warm-ups, learning Shakespeare, learning new plays, even by myself, walking around, memorizing huge chunks of text daily, and just basically a workaholic. And now I just fight for my life to try to get an hour of writing in a day. I say an hour because sometimes it could be 2 hours, but if the migraine hits, I might not be able to write for weeks. So I'm just doing everything I can to try to regulate my health so that I can do a tenth of what I could do before.
And are there any strategies that you have tried that have helped you with managing your symptoms?
The doctor, my rehab doctor at GF Strong, said that the brain likes routine. Uh, Other than that routine and reducing stress, that's all that I know that works. I've tried everything. I've tried wacky pills from around the world. I've heard everyone who phoned me, oh, I heard this works, that works. The latest thing, I talked to a guy in Oxford, England yesterday who's been doing these nicotine patches. So I'm going to give
Mm-hmm.
that a try. I've basically tried everything I've heard of out of desperation. And unfortunately, I haven't come up with the silver bullet yet. But I will say that meditation and routine and low stress life helps.
Okay. Tough question up next. What are some of the biggest losses that you have suffered as a result of developing long COVID?
This is hard because um, I feel like I've lost my life, my my career that I worked my whole life for and risked everything for and worked so hard for is I'm just struggling to salvage a piece of it. So my career, which is my identity and my dignity, is in shambles, and I'm fighting for my life to try to resurrect that. I've lost friends, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you wish that people knew about your whole experience with getting COVID and being a long COVID sufferer?
Just that we are actually suffering and that we may look good, but we are in despair. And if people could see it like another ailment, they they would treat us differently. But instead, I get more, oh, you're fine, or you don't look bad, or you're 100% now, instead of, um, oh, I really understand that you're suffering, and I can't believe it's been 3.5 years, and I can't believe that how it must feel for you to be worried that you're never going to be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a post online and it was something to the extent of, yeah, I may look fine on the outside, but good thing the majority of my body is on the inside. Like
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
you can't see what's going on inside,
yeah.
right? What do you need from friends and family and the general public, the medical community? What do you need from everyone?
I need people to take it easy on me, friends and family. I need them to take it easy on me because I mentally can't handle things. And the medical system, um, I don't know what's going on. This guy I talked to from Oxford the other day, he's really messed up like we are. And he claims that there's 2.5 million people in the UK with long COVID, and um,
Mm-hmm. I've heard that, yeah.
there there just needs to be a lot of focus on figuring out what's wrong with us and figuring out how to fix it. That's the other problem I have
Mm-hmm.
is when I read articles about long COVID, they'll always say, this article is about long COVID. Long COVID is defined by people that are having symptoms uh, 3 months past infection, or they've got this kind of small number that if you're still feeling sick 3 months, and it's like, no, these people are like 3 and 4 years of I don't know, they just don't word it properly. The long COVID is defined by, continued symptoms after 3 months. It's like, just say long COVID is like is a there are, there's people who are sick for 2 to 4 years and aren't getting better.
Their lives have been permanently changed, possibly. I mean, I don't see myself waking up one day, 5 years, magic number,
Yeah.
wake up and I'm all better. I don't see that happening. Last question. Has there been any silver lining for you? Is there anything that you have learned about yourself through becoming chronically ill?
A friend of mine said, "Oh, maybe you're gonna live longer because of this." Because I was working so hard and living a fast-paced lifestyle, that in my friend's opinion, that a positive way to look at this is it's slowed my life down, and maybe there's a chance I'm gonna live longer because I'm living a different lifestyle now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was very ambitious with my career, and maybe now that I've slowed down, it's given me a chance to look at other areas in my life that may be deserving of more attention and focus that I would have missed out before by just working. It's made me think, well, maybe this is good. Maybe I shouldn't have been putting up with stuff from this people before. Maybe I should have. Maybe I was spending too much energy dealing with other people's drama, and maybe my tolerance was my yeah was too high, and maybe this is healthier for me to distance myself from unhealthy people.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's time to focus on our health
Yeah,
for the first time, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me. And I hope that it helps someone who's listening out there to know that there is someone out there just like them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Craig Rogers for writing and recording this amazing theme music. Thank you for listening. Please make sure to follow Voices of Long COVID on our Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube accounts. New episodes drop every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.